Jagmeet Singh and the NDP continue to hold Canadians hostage on behalf of Trudeau. They've been called out by Pierre, and now they're being called out by the mainstream media. And now more than ever, it would be important for them to call an election, because every month that is delayed is another 10 months of recovery for Canadians. That's how bad things are. There are big moves being announced that could be awesome for Canada, and I'm sick today, so I'm extra pissed. Let's get into it.
There was one question that came up over and over on Parliament Hill this week.
But you've been asked several times and you won't answer. Do you have confidence in the Trudeau government as they stand now?
I will be clear again. We have absolutely ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau, and that means an election is more likely.
Clear. That's not clear. You're
And an
equivocating.
election, whenever that election comes, we'll be ready to fight it.
The NDP has been effectively bound to the Liberals on every important vote over the past 2.5 years. That agreement, he mentioned, is why. And now that Jagmeet Singh has ripped it up, the NDP has a brand new power, the power to topple the government and trigger an election. The question is, will they? And if so, when? Before the NDP pulled out of this deal, Canada's election was scheduled for October 2025. And the government was clear. They wanted to keep it that way. But that seems a lot less likely now that the NDP has pulled its support. Jagmeet Singh freely admits this.
Well, as I've said, I've ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau, and I know that means that an election is now more likely as a result.
But
Jagmeathead will continue to say the same thing over and over. I've been clear. I ripped up the agreement. Yeah, what does that mean? You haven't taken any action on it.
more likely is as far as he'd go. So we spoke to a whole bunch of people, experts, analysts.
This is what I always get so annoyed with on CBC. University of Ottawa, Dalhousie University, and UBC. You get these lifelong academics who just sit there and their university salaries and, don't really speak for normal Canadians. But I guess they're just political analysts in this one, so whatever.
Pollsters, university professors, to try to get as full a range of answers as possible to that million-dollar question. If an election is coming earlier than expected, when will it come? Let's start with the earliest possible scenario.
The probability of having an election has increased a lot, not just a bit, but a lot, to have an election in the fall.
As soon as Parliament resumes business in the fall, the official opposition almost certainly will call a vote of non-confidence.
Yeah, now, a vote of no confidence is pretty much what it sounds like.
Have you liked the video yet? If you haven't liked the video, it's a free way to support the channel. It gets shown to more people who gets to see what we talk about here. If you do like what we talk about, feel free to subscribe. Love to have you on board. Back to the video.
At basically any time, force a vote in the House of Commons that could bring down the government and trigger an election. Usually in a majority government, the opposition doesn't have the numbers to actually pull it off. But in a minority, different story. So 2.5 years ago, the NDP agreed to support the Liberals every time one of these votes came up. And in exchange, the Liberals helped the NDP push through a bunch of stuff that they wanted. This is how the Liberals managed to survive, even just a couple of months ago, when the Conservatives put forward one of these potentially election-triggering motions on a carbon tax bill.
Why don't we just end the debate and let Canadians decide and have a carbon tax election?
And everyone...
The reason that's so frustrating is Jagmeathead has had time to call this election previously when he knew he was, for months, he just ripped up the agreement, but for months he's been saying like Trudeau's not doing this. He's helping all these corporations and blah, blah, blah. And he's a friend of the billionaires and saying all the stuff that he says. And it's like, I don't know how Jagmeet has any level of support. He is not a serious politician. He is clearly a coward who is in power for his own benefit. That's what it looks like anyways, allegedly.
When we spoke to agreed. The Conservatives may very well try this again as soon as they can.
Poilievre, I think, has a space to play here where he comes in and puts a lot of pressure on the NDP for saying, if you don't want to be in this deal with him anymore, well, then why don't you vote no confidence?
So with Jagmeet Singh making such a show of breaking ties with the Liberals,
Trudeau's Liberals can't deliver change.
the NDP could decide to vote against the government at the earliest available opportunity. If they did, there'd be like a 5-week campaign, and an election could come as early as October. That's pretty fast.
I would say it's a 50-50 chance because I have listened to the video of Jagmeet Singh and his press conference, and he has repeated over and over and over that Canadians should be prepared for an election.
Everyone we spoke to agreed he does sound like he's ready to start campaigning, but consider the position the NDP is in right now and how long they might need to recover. So in the polls, they're pretty far behind, both the Conservatives and the Liberals. And according to one recent survey, more than 30% of respondents said their opinion of Singh and the NDP has actually gotten worse since 2022, when that deal with the Liberals was struck.
They're hearing constituents saying, we're tired of this government and you seem to be holding it together. You're with them. You're in bed with them.
They need some time to rebrand themselves.
So recap.
So basically, what's been happening is Jagmeet has lost all support, pretty much even within his party. So I don't know how people even pretend he's a serious leader. But they're saying, like, you're just a liberal at this point. Like, you've supported everything. And again, why this is so unbelievably crucial is Canada has so many things that we need to fix. And you guys know, obviously, even though I want Pierre to win, I've been critical of Pierre. But he's made some recent announcements that he's going to support the natural resource sector. He's going to help us get, LNG to Asia, to some of these places that are getting commitments from other countries now that is at the expense of Canada. He is wanting to make, removing the carbon tax is a big thing in itself that would help out so many Canadians, help lower prices, and really impact Canadian standard of living. And Pierre is finally, he's been vocal about the carbon tax for a while, but some of these other things with the resources and immigration, he's finally turning the page that we wanted to see. So this is stuff that could be getting cleaned up. But the NDP are going, how do we turn this into a political play at the expense of Canadians to give our party more power? How can you be the People's Party, the Workers' Party, fighting for the little guy when people are starving, they can't find places to live, there's all these things happening, and you're going to delay election because you want more power?
Casting the NDP in a different light, shedding that image of being a liberal partner, yes, that might take some time, but also consider how else a fall election might be bad for the NDP. These are provincial elections slated for October. Elections where the NDP machine is fundraising, campaigning.
They are under threat from the rise of the BC Conservatives. David Eby needs to have every single NDP resource going towards that provincial campaign between now and October.
That means staff, volunteers, many who do double duty, who work both provincial and federal elections. To do both at the same time, that's tough. Consider how much of the NDP's agenda is close to becoming law, but not quite there. Pharmacare is a big one. Liberal and NDP cooperation has pushed it through the House, but not the Senate. Calling an early election might jeopardize quite a bit.
If an election is called immediately and Poilievre comes in and rips that up, then that's the end of the big gains that the NDP has used to justify entering into this blind confidence arrangement.
So the NDP may very well decide they're not ready for a fall election. They'd rather buy some time. But how much time do they actually need? So
it doesn't matter how much time they take, they need. Yeah, you can try and turn around your opinion. If Jagmeet stays the leader of the NDP, and first of all, if you watch this and you're thinking about voting NDP, don't watch these videos because your IQ must be lower than the room temperature, because that guy is, again, an absolute coward. The NDP party is the worst.
Right now, they're a full 25 points behind the Conservatives in the polls. So if they're trying to actually form government, yeah, that's a pretty big gap to close. But they're only 8 points behind the Liberals.
My sense is that Singh's ambition is to become the leader of the official opposition.
Even if it means a Conservative majority government, if the NDP was the official opposition, that's an outcome they would happily take.
So the question then becomes, is it possible for Singh to bridge that 8-point gap by the end of this year? In theory, yeah, the NDP has done it before. In March of 2011, Jack Layton's NDP, were also polling about 8 points behind the second-place Liberals. Just over a month later, they managed to flip that gap and were polling 8 points ahead of the Liberals going into the election.
Canadians have asked New Democrats to take on more responsibility in Parliament. For the first time in our history, they have asked us to serve as Canada's official opposition.
Now, different leader, different circumstances, we get it. But the point...
Yeah, different leader, different circumstances. Jack Layton, this is how far we've moved left as a country of Canada. And this is why I always say, like, even our Conservative Party is not that conservative in the grand scheme, like, especially socially. So whenever I see people online like, oh, the Conservatives are going to take away these... Our Conservatives, if they were in America, would literally be called left-wing Democrats. So Jack Layton is literally looking like a normal guy, RIP in peace, compared to the absolute, loser who is Jag Meathead Singh.
Point is, a big reversal in politics isn't impossible.
The challenge is to come up with a really transformative agenda that really differentiates them from the Liberals. Imagine they said, we need a guaranteed annual income. That's a bold new policy initiative.
So if they have moved up a little bit, if they're closing the gap on the Liberals, maybe they're even in second place in the polls, then the NDP might think that a campaign in the winter could be worth it.
And there is a built-in time pressure that lends itself to a winter election, because while the NDP can take time to rebuild, they're also going to get hammered by the Conservatives if they prop up the Liberal government for too long.
So my message to Sellout Singh is this: commit today to voting for a carbon tax election at the earliest confidence vote in the House of Commons.
If there is a real appetite for change, and the NDP is perceived as being dragging its heels because it's not yet ready, that could certainly hurt them.
Because Singh didn't just come out and say, this deal has run its course, it's time to move on. He called Trudeau selfish, he called him weak, and said he's ready to fight. So every time he votes to keep the government intact, not triggering an election, he's going to have to explain why.
These things that he said about Trudeau are serious, right? If he really believes that Trudeau is all for the corporate sector and not for the people, well, then what the heck is he going to do supporting them anymore?
So yeah, exactly. Like the fact that this guy continues to pretend, like it is just such a level of hypocritical actions that I don't know if we've ever seen it in Canadian politics to the level that is Jagmeet Singh. Because even Trudeau, I'll even say this about Trudeau, as much as I can't stand the guy, when he says like he's gonna do something, he just tells Canadians to suck it, and he just does it. Like he's like, suck it, I'm doing this, you guys all hate it, but I'm doing it because I want to. And we're all like, no, we don't want you to do that. And he goes, well, how about suck it? Jagmeet goes, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm trying to help you. And then he's like shaking a hand and getting handed money underneath the table from some like corporate sponsor, holding up the Liberals. At least Trudeau, to his credit, he just tells us to suck it. So
one opportunity the NDP could pinpoint as a way of triggering a winter election would be if the government puts out another fall economic statement, like they've done the last few years.
Typically, anything that has to do with money, with a budget, with estimates, appropriations are considered matters of confidence.
And if a vote is a matter of confidence, that's a chance to topple the government. But here's where some of the experts we spoke to wonder if there might be a compelling argument for Jagmeet Singh to bide his time even further still, especially if he feels like the threat of an election gives him leverage to extract concessions from government.
I wonder if there's a scenario around the fall economic statement where we see some politics from Jagmeet Singh, and he says, look, I'll support you, but you got to do this, this, and this, which I think would be good for the NDP, show people what you want to stand up for.
So let's say spring rolls around. Jagmeet Singh has had half a year to differentiate himself. The snow's starting to melt. The Conservatives are still pressing the NDP to topple the government. And then the Liberals throw their annual budget into the mix.
If you don't pass a budget, you can't govern, right? So a budget is a matter of confidence. It is always a matter of confidence.
Historically, failing to pass a budget has been one of the most common reasons for minority governments to fall. In fact, it's what happened to Trudeau's dad in 1974. And in this case, all of the analysts we spoke to said the NDP might not have much of a choice here. It might become risky for the NDP to vote for the Liberals' next budget after everything Singh has said over the past few days.
Justin Trudeau has let Canadians down. And Canadians are done with his endless disappointment and delay.
Because
the thing is, they are talking about, oh, well, if the NDP can push in some of their platforms and then the Liberals will agree to it and they agree to voting for the Liberals, he has said so many things that, one, cannot be taken back. Two, anything that gets passed is just a platitude. It's nothing. It's meaningless. It's not actually going to help anybody. So again, you have to just be like not able to see more than 15 minutes ahead in the future that him pretending to get these things passed through in the Liberal government are going to help anybody, because the election's going to happen in October at the latest regardless, and the Liberals are going to lose. So everything that they pretend to pass is temporary. And again, it's damaging Canada because we need change now, because the damage is harder to fix than, you know, doing stuff correctly up front.
a budget vote isn't just about one issue, one bill, or even a handful of spending priorities. It's a vote on the Liberals' entire agenda for the year to come.
People actually pay attention to it. And so people are waiting to see what the reactions are for the opposition leaders and if there's there's drama around it.
Voting down the government in the spring probably makes a lot more sense than trying to swallow their pride a little bit and back them for another little while.
So, could we see a spring election? Well, at this point, according to most of the people we spoke to, it's probably the most likely scenario because it gives the NDP 5 or 6 months to get ready, to carve out their own position, and to avoid the risks we laid out of calling an election too early. And the budget gives them a pretty good opportunity to really take a stand, to say, we tried to get the Liberals to put X, Y, Z into the budget, but they didn't, so let's go to the polls.
So again, 100% political play at the expense of Canadians so that they can gain more power. So while Canadians are struggling, we need the carbon tax to be fixed. We need the economy to be worked on. So let's just let the Canadians suffer for 6 more months for a little bit more power.
So that would be, I would say, the big date to look at. The budget, which will be presented, we don't really know, March, April, maybe May.
The Liberals could, of course, also go to the Bloc Québécois to try to get some support to keep the government alive. But there's not really much that can be gained out of that for either the NDP or the Bloc Québécois, because anything that's in the budget will end up getting undone by the Conservatives within 12 months.
But what a tough thing to predict, right? Singh's political calculations will be shifting constantly. He'll be watching the polls. He'll be watching the upcoming by-elections and provincial elections to see how his party does. He's also watching the US election.
Well, these could be judgment calls, right? To kind of estimate how they believe the public is feeling about their current situation, how much they want change, and when would be an appropriate time to do that.
We want change now. Call the election now. If you want to go down as not one of the biggest coward hypocrites in Canadian politics history, do it, Jag Meathead. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. You absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.